Nick Thomas-Symonds.
Thank you, Mrs. Moon. It's a pleasure to serve under you as Chair, and I warmly congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Ogmore, both for securing the debate and for, if I may say so, the very considered and thoughtful way in which he opened the debate this afternoon. My honourable friend covered a number of the issues, and I propose to focus my remarks on three particular areas: the early years, vocational qualifications, and then finally our academic sphere and our elite universities. There is no doubt, Mrs. Moon, that the early years are extraordinarily important, and a lot of data would suggest that by the age of 7 we can predict what likely GCSE results are going to be. That suggests that the biggest difference can be made in those very, very early years of life. And in that regard, I really do praise the work of the Welsh Government in focusing on the early years, which is very, very important. And as the years go by, clearly that investment will feed through into dealing with this problem. Child poverty and... I'll give way.
But does not my honourable friend share my concern that Wales's performance in the PISA tables and that endeavours to improve teaching and learning in Wales should concentrate on releasing teachers to be trained and perhaps not on some of the temporary initiatives that we've seen in the past?
I don't underplay for a moment the wider challenges that there are. And of course, where I do agree with the Honourable Lady is in respect of a holistic approach that clearly does involve support for teaching. I'm merely remarking at the moment that it seems that all the data suggests that those very, very early years are so important in terms of the results that are later achieved, particularly at age 16. But I want to just come on for a moment to child poverty. And my honourable friend, the member for Ogmore, mentioned the achievements of the last Labour government, which are of course extremely important in that regard. And I think it is, to say the least, the greatest of disappointments that in 2015 the UK government chose to change the definition, which to me is simply escaping from the problem, not facing it as what it should be the case. On vocational qualifications, Mrs. Moon, it seems to me that there is an historic problem here, because in the post-war era, if you go back to the Butler Education Act of 1944, most people understand it as having created grammar schools and secondary moderns. But actually it was never intended to be bipartite. It was meant to be tripartite. It was meant to include technical schools as well. And I do think that in post-war Britain we haven't developed those technical schools perhaps in the way that we should have done. That isn't, however, to neglect the fine work that has been done on apprenticeships. And again, I've seen in my own constituency and elsewhere the work of the Welsh Government in this regard. But there is undoubtedly still more to do in promoting apprenticeships as a career path, and of course to have parity of esteem with gaining academic qualifications. Last summer I actually visited an ITV apprenticeship scheme. It was outside Wales, in fact. It was actually in Leeds, but nonetheless what I experienced there actually makes the point, because I saw a very fine apprenticeship scheme where people would be working around television sets and so on, gaining skills that could either be used in that environment or indeed used in a broader trade. The problem was, when I spoke to the apprentices themselves, most of them had had to seek out the information about that opportunity themselves on the internet rather than from their own careers advisors. And I think we really do need to be promoting the apprenticeships route at a far younger age right across the United Kingdom. I want to come to my third point, which is about our elite universities. University isn't, of course, for everybody, but the fact remains that around our country, many of those who are in top public and private sector jobs have attended either Oxford or Cambridge or universities within the Russell Group. And a lot of the statistics that have come forward recently should really, I think, alarm us. My honourable friend, the member for Tottenham, produced a report which showed a geographical domination by the southeast of England of all those elite university places. And freedom of information requests on local authorities really do paint a very stark picture. The bottom 8, which includes my own local authority of Torfaen, for the 2010 to 2015 period, 8 offers to go to Cambridge University. Contrast that with the top 8, which include places like Surrey and Kent, 4,800 offers in that same period. Now, that kind of division has to be dealt with and, frankly, isn't sustainable in the long term. Now, prior to entering this house, Mrs. Moon, I worked as an Oxford University tutor and lecturer for 14 years, from just after I graduated in 2001 until I was elected to Parliament in 2015. And over that period, I had a great deal to do with the admissions process. And it seemed to me that there were three very clear lessons that came to me from that. Aspiration is, of course, absolutely vital. Applying, whether it's Oxford and Cambridge or the other elite universities, actually wanting to apply there, being able to think that this is something for me is absolutely crucial. But in and of itself, that isn't enough without the support around it. And it always seemed to me that what marked out the successful interviewees was their confidence and their ability to sell themselves. In the Oxford and Cambridge case, it applies to the interview situation, but it applies more broadly across the university sector in terms of the personal statements, in terms of how people are able to express what they've done. The third point was in terms of networking and networking skills. And that was something that I thought was always present in the personal statements by the extracurricular activity and by the work experience. Because those who existed in fine networks to begin with were always able to have far more opportunities to use in the university admissions process than someone who did not. And it seems to me that those types of skills we really do need to be teaching right across our school sector so that people have them at ages 15, 16, 17 and 18. I'm happy to give way.
Do you agree with me that actually there have been some chilling figures on this? And I appreciate it was quite a long time ago since I went to university, and I know my old university of Bristol has improved considerably in this regard now. But I can remember when I was at university that the figures for the faculty as a whole were more than 70% of all students were independently educated in my faculty, and in the department within that faculty that it was at the highest. I think it was at 91%, which was staggering, really.
Yes. My honourable friend really does make a very good point, because the statistic per cohort on average is around about 7% go to fee-paying schools, but the percentage at our elite universities is far, far higher. Now, why might that be? My experience always was that from the state sector, there were never enough applicants in every single cohort. And that is something, as I've already indicated, I think we have to tackle by demystification, by trying to speak and making clear that there are no places that are not for you if you have the talent to get there. Now, that sounds easy, but I appreciate that it is a huge challenge. But my honourable friend, the member for Caerphilly, mentioned the Oxbridge Ambassador for Wales report, which I was pleased to play some small part in actually producing before I entered this House. And its author was my predecessor as the Member of Parliament for Torfaen, now Lord Murphy. And what that report sought to do was firstly to address the scale of the problem. As my honourable friend set out, it was published in 2014. It also suggested a series of practical measures which are being rolled out across Wales. We probably won't see the results of that immediately. We will have to see how that pans out now in the years to come. But central to its recommendations is about having regional hubs in Wales, so that the skills that I've talked about, the networking skills, the ability to sell oneself in interview, the ability to sell oneself on paper, these are things that can be looked at on a regional basis, where schools can identify those who have the potential to go to our elite universities and then can go to these hubs to be provided with that support. That is something that, in my firm belief, can make a difference going forward. And it has to make a difference, because as that report highlighted, there are parts of Wales, and it isn't just Wales incidentally, it applies to other parts of the UK as well, but there are areas that are frankly deserts for Oxbridge applications. And I would conclude really by saying this, that we talk obviously about university applications. Of course we want our universities to continue to be world leading. But this isn't about some sort of suggestion of social engineering occurring at age 18. Rather, it is about the interests of our country that we do not lose some of the most talented people simply because they do not apply to universities because they think it's not for them.